Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking with Peter and Seth about The Nautical Sun. The Nautical Sun is an animated short that we wanted to feel like a throwback, like something from the early days of Disney or Popeye the Sailor Man. But we were using a new piece of software that no one had ever used and was untested. Would all this pixel pushing sink us to the bottom of the sea? Or would the Nautical Sun get to shore? Listen and find out. Welcome to Heralds and Fools, the podcast where we talk shop. We talk about client projects, passion projects, the nitty-gritty details of what makes creative life so fun. So today I want to break down this project, which I really love that we did earlier in the year. 2 different versions, same character. Just talk about process, talk about how we attack this from an animation perspective, and have you guys break it down for us. First off the bat, do you guys have any favorite moments from this or any memories? How was the production cycle on this?
Overall, it was always nice when everything would get composited and people would watch everything put together. They were like, "Oh, this is what we're making." There was
Yes.
like I feel like there was that moment almost every scene when people were
That is
the people
best
doing
part.
all the animation were excited to see it then in place.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that was always fun.
It feels like making a pie and then you put it in the oven. You're like, it's like so
Start to
much
smell it a little
before
bit.
you get to that moment
Yeah.
of smelling it.
A lot of
So,
random steps
Yeah.
and then
just-
one juicy pie.
Yeah, you see Seth put it all together and this goes from, it's like 5 times better. It's like you have these incremental, it gets better. But then when you composite it and do the color treatment and all this is like a huge shift.
Yeah.
And it's like endorphins release,
Yeah, it's like the point when producers and the directors are like make a sigh of relief, like, oh, okay, this is gonna be fine. We're gonna get through it.
Yeah,
It's
no,
gonna look good.
I hear you. I think and that was definitely the case because this was set up when we first started talking about this project, the main sort of goal of the project was to make something akin to a parable, kind of design our own parable about putting faith first and about the danger of not considering faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to tell a whole story in 30 seconds. And so when you set that as a goal, 30 seconds to tell a whole story and you have it be very character driven, it's like there are a lot of steps to get it to that. And we had a cool heading, which was to do this sort of throwback, sort of Popeye, a little bit classic 2D cell style animation. So that required some invention. All right. So before we dive into this, that was a pun. So let's just dive in with a Nautical Sun and take a look at this and we can break it down.
Nice.
So this was a dual project between Circus Tarzan and St. Paul Street Evangelization. It was a project that really was just to say like, hey, let's isolate something. Let's get people to remember Jesus during this time. And the whole thing, that was it. Like that was like, it was sort of wide open. They had some pillars they wanted to hit, but it was basically like just a quick 30-second remember what's important. So I had this idea. I think we kind of threw a bunch of ideas at him, but I think this one idea that I had was this dude is burdened by a boat full of junk that he doesn't need.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the thing that is causing, that could cause his boat to go down. He'll never get to shore. What's the point? And it was to tie to Mark 8:36. What does it profit a man to gain the world but lose his soul in the process?
Mm.
And so that was the North Star. And then to get there, we had this concept of doing, I think, Peter, I threw it to you to do concept art. And it was like, it's like a sailor and he's got this boat and it's way too burdened.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first like concept art pieces we were doing?
Yeah. I remember at some point just narrowed in on Popeye, like character model sheets and Song of the Sea. Yeah. I think those 2 were like really big influences and then early Disney stuff.
Yeah. And those, I mean, early Disney, Popeye, Song of the Sea. Those are good North Stars to have, but they're also intimidating. And we also knew, because our team on this was really small, we didn't have a big budget. We had time. We had time to create it. But we knew we'd have to attack things a little differently. Because I think our core team on this was probably, it was you guys, Megan, Isabel, Jason. I think that was it. Was on the core animations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even think we had, well, until the very end, we had someone to do sound design. But I don't think we had an editor really or anything. It was all just.
It was very much an animation team collaboration. Yeah. And I mean, I think the end result works. We have two different versions that are both highlighting different things. In the first version, it's just the process of I see shore, I see the danger, I know I have to get rid of this stuff to get to shore. And then the Bible quote sort of sums it all up. It's like, this is what's important. Don't let things that aren't important get in the way. And the other one's a little more direct. It's the boat cracks in half and there's a geyser shooting through it.
Right.
And then the main character, the nautical son. This was a joke. So when we started, we were like, this is like a prodigal son story, like he walks away, he's like distracted by the world, and then he fixes it. And we started calling it, I think you came up with the nautical son.
It was just a Slack feed. We were just goofing off.
But the client loved it.
So
the client ended up calling it the nautical son. So it was the official title.
Like a nickname turns into the name someone gets called all the time.
Yeah.
How it felt.
Yeah. And so the nautical sun hears this like bump, and it's this driftwood mast that resembles a cross that patches the hole. He's able to reach shore, and that's the grace. There's a lot of story to pack into 30 seconds.
Yeah, I remember that about it. Just like trying to, because you and Jason made an animatic essentially. So you had kind of like puzzle pieced a lot of that already.
Yeah, I think we'd done like multiple animatics.
Yeah.
Like probably over a dozen animatics of just like playing with the timing a little this way, a little that way. There were different levels of the storm, different levels of other actions he would take, focusing on, I think at one point he threw a bust of himself out, like a statue of himself. Because it was like, you have to abandon your pride. There was a lot of directions we were going.
Yeah.
I think some of the technical challenges that we knew we were going to have to face were the character motion, but then also the water and the interaction in the water. Because the water is the type of thing where it's like, if we did this in Cell, this would take a long time, and we'd have to do a lot of effects animation. And that's where you came in, Seth, figuring out some of the early tests with water and how to do it. How did you accomplish that?
So I was really looking at Song of the Sea stills and things to just aim for as far as the water, but what it broke down to was, if I'm going to do this in After Effects, this kind of just needs to be like stacked waves.
Yeah.
And nothing crazy. It's just some wave warp and number of fractal noise bent and skewed and pinched and in different ways to get different ripples, and trying to make something that's going to work, that can work for a whole bunch of scenes.
So in all these shots, including the shots at the end and all of these shots, this is all After Effects waves, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really just the same wave duplicated a whole bunch of times and offset and
is it
pushed back.
Is it in 3D space, or is it just stacked?
Yeah. It's all in 3D, which you get the depth of field and stuff.
Like the blur is.
I think the blur is actually artificial though.
Okay.
I think the front and the back, each wave I just added a little bit more and desaturate a little bit. There's no it sort of feels like there could be a volume or something, but that's all artificial.
Yeah, I think the end result on the waves is great, because it doesn't feel too dissimilar from the world. It doesn't feel too dissimilar from the Cell stuff, is what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this concept art you did, Peter, as sort of like setting the tone. This is what the client likes. You'd done some character sheets. You'd done some initial animation tests. I think the first animation test you did was with the telescope.
Yeah. Coming out of the window.
And then we had this animatic where it had all of the different scenes, and some of the core questions you ask yourself when you're attacking this now. It's like, okay, this is what the story needs to be. This is what we're headed towards. How do we break it down into manageable chunks? And so that's where the question of Cell versus puppet animation, After Effects, pipeline, that's when we start asking those questions. How do you address that? Like when you guys are talking together about like breaking down a storyboard, how do you address which scene should be handled in which way?
I think at the time that we were plotting this out, at least I was attracted to rubber hose. We hadn't done something rubber. It's a goofy.
Explain rubber hose. What's rubber hose?
Okay, so rubber hose is essentially like in animation, it's a kind of more leans in a more cartoony genre where there's not like limb articulation. It's literally like arms are like rubber hoses. So early Mickey Mouse, that's basically it. It's just you get a level of mobility from that. It gives you a lot of mobility, but it's also leans comical. So you usually don't see rubber hose animation with like serious subject matter. But if you use it sparingly, you can make caricatures of things and make them very expressive. And so when we got the boards from you and Jason and we were blocking out the captain in these different shots, one of my favorite parts was like him leaning out of the window and, in like rubber hose or just cartoons, you can get these like really crazy exaggerations, like the eyes get really big and pop out of the head maybe or something. And so we hadn't done that sort of thing. And I was like, well, let's try to like just push exaggeration just to, give it a go.
Yeah.
And I think it was also a matter of perspective on the character. We're gonna have to see him a bunch of different angles.
Yeah.
And I also want to add that this is the first and maybe last project that we did in Procreate Dreams.
Oh, so we should talk about that.
Oh,
that's a whole industry discussion.
Yeah.
But keep going.
Yeah, because we were really excited for that to come out, and so like, we can do all this right here on the iPad.
Yeah.
And so
this was like we started. So that's a good. When did Procreate Dreams come out? I'm like, I want to look this up. Yeah, it was November 22nd, 2023. Okay. So we had started this. I didn't realize this went back into 2023. We didn't wrap this till 2024. But when we started this process, we started it before Procreate was out. And I think it was like that. We were like waiting for the week of the drop.
Yeah.
That was only a year ago, basically.
Yeah.
That seems wild to me that was only a year ago.
I think what we would quickly realize is to put that into a studio setting.
It's not ready yet.
Yeah.
And
have you guys looked at it since that period of time?
I checked it recently to see if like the main issue was in Procreate, the drawing and painting app. There is a animation feature that has it's just built off of Procreate. It has all the features Procreate has.
Yeah. And
I really like that. But in the Dreams one, it doesn't have all the tools that Procreate does. I think it's a storage problem that the developers are figuring out.
Normally, we do a lot of design in Procreate, and then we convert it to a PSD, and we can use that artwork.
Yeah, in After Effects.
It comes right in. But with Dreams, all that it can really create is a dream file, or you can make it an image sequence. But then it was this is what we did then. But then it was image sequence on the iPad, or like you had to airdrop it to a Mac, and then I was on a PC, so I could never like get something directly. And so there was no direct connection to our QNAP to our server to put stuff on. And get things on there, and then making edits between people. I guess there was some sort of cloud,
and the files are huge. The Procreate Dream files are huge. Like just they filled up the iPad capacity very quickly, and I feel like we all realized too, iPads are sort of a bottleneck.
Yeah, because we
disrupts flow.
We would have done this before. We would have done it in Harmony if we were going to do a cell animation, but there was the quality of the brushes is what we're looking for, and this is no shade on Procreate. Procreate is not at all. As far as like a piece of like software goes, I think Procreate is probably the most like artist forward, intentional. Yeah. Even just the way they price it. It's you buy Procreate one time for like $20 and you have it forever. Yep. And it feels great. But I remember that hype because you and I think I was even like, we're going to be like one of the first projects Procreate Dreams, like
Yeah.
we can like share it and talk about process. And then you guys very quick were like, it's not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, it does have like a really, and you had brought up Calipeg a long time ago. I'm like, oh no, maybe we should have tried Calipeg because I remember that had a lot of features. But yeah, just iPads in a studio setting where it's like very like it's all everyone's relying on everybody to have stuff on a shared server. It can become
a bottleneck
even outside of like the particular program.
I remember like when we first started using Procreate, there definitely was like, you guys were excited because you were like, oh, I could go sit on a couch or I could go draw outside or whatever. And then it just does come with, there's a reason why we're tied to desks.
Yeah. I think I was really taken by this idea of like recovering the magic of the early Disney masters and my solution to that was, or my answer to that was do it like they did. So we ended up hand painting in a digital program every frame. And we actually had to do that because each frame was drawn with pencil, like again, a digital version of it. But
to break it down for the layman, right? Like something like Toon Boom, you're able to make your pencil work, you're able to turn it into a vector shape, which then can act as a container, more or less, where the color, like if you want to do a color fill, it will fill the area up to that line and it'll be sensitive to that.
Right.
But in Procreate Dreams, the way you guys were doing it, you would hand draw that line and you couldn't just like fill it in with a bucket.
Right.
The computer or the iPad would not know, Procreate Dreams wouldn't know where to stop it. So you had to hand paint every color and fill in the lines.
Exactly.
And I think that was also one thing we were looking forward to with Procreate Dreams because of that fill tool in Procreate. That you're like, oh, you just drag the color in and bam,
yes,
which is exceptional.
There's a great fill tool, right? Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe I was banking on that. And
well, I think that was the thing is like when we opened up Procreate Dreams, it was like, oh, it doesn't have everything Procreate has.
Yeah.
It has like some of it. It doesn't even have all the brushes or anything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but the brushwork still looks good. I think what you were aiming for to recover that sort of sense is like it's in there. Like the character does feel like a throwback character. He does the boil on the lines is very hand done. It can only have been done by humans. It's not something that could be replicated by, like turning on a boil in After Effects. It looks handmade because it is handmade. I think one of the things that our studio has never figured out, and I sort of hope we never figure out, is how to be like, here's a play we've run before.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of studios that are like, we do this.
Yeah.
We do product videos that are done in Cinema 4D for shoes.
Yeah.
And they are the coolest things you've ever seen. When we do stuff, it's usually like people will be like, we have this ephemeral problem that we want to solve. And we want you to come up with a brand new art style to showcase this. And usually, no matter how many times it happens, we're like, that sounds awesome. We're going to figure it out. So I feel like in Procreate, like if there was a TV show that someone was doing in Procreate, like, and they had the time to do the R&D on the upfront, they could probably figure out how to incorporate it in a pipeline.
Yeah.
Or like, Toon Boom Harmony, like rigs, like a lot of shows work like that. The problem is we're sort of rapid response like team. They're like, hey, we got this thing. It's got to be done soon. And we're like, cool. We're not going to play it safe. And they're like, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And then we're just making up new pipelines as we go.
Yeah. I feel like for many of the years that I've been here, it feels like this like catch up game with all these different tools and stuff. But as we go, it feels like to just have like a fundamental understanding of all these things, then we'll have more of a solidity to kind of like, okay, we could a little of this, little. It's like Chef's Kitchen. Like, okay, they're telling me I need to cook this thing, in an hour.
Yeah.
But like they're relying on their awareness of like culinary art, to make that work. And there's improvising, but there is this foundational I get this, I hadn't felt that way about 3D, but just being around you guys spearheading 3D stuff. And it's always been overwhelming to me, but as like you interact with these programs, it's like, okay, like these same principles under all the technical, stuff, there's these kind of principles. And that's one thing I wanted to bring up before I forget was probably my favorite takeaway from the Sarkis thing was working with Isabel and Megan and watching Richard Williams.
Oh, dude.
You guys gave us, I didn't want to jump into that. But
no, dude, you should. So like Peter comes, because we're waist deep wading with the captain through the sea. And Peter just comes down and he's like, hey, we need to pause and I need to throw a seminar, basically. Talk about that. Talk about why you did that and what you did.
The specific style that we were going for, the volumes and everything were really tied down. Even though it's goofy, all these kind of volumetric shapes, the face needs to turn and you don't want it boiling. And what I mean by boiling is like, if you do cell incorrectly, you can have each drawing kind of jumping around and it's not tracking. You don't encounter that in when you have a pre-made asset that you're rigging, because you're not recreating it for each frame. It's the computer. You're giving the computer a command to move it. It's like puppeting. And so with 2D hand drawn, a huge problem can be that if you don't map out the movements, like things they call it popcorning. I don't remember where I heard that, but I think that's my favorite way to call it, because it looks like it's like you're trying to get a simple movement, like, and it looks like, and like to get flow, it can be very hard. And it's like, it's just that particular, you need a lot of like scaffolding, and it's not implicit in the program. It's all
the human doing it.
You have to understand the principles, and it's a lot of drawing principles, because a lot of it's about like solidity of form. So you need to know how to draw a volume from this angle and draw a volume from another angle.
Weirdly,
and then move them in arcs that are fluid.
Yeah, weirdly, this is one of the problems with a lot of the AI video models right now, is they have their own version of popcorning where they don't have a consistent volume or weight from frame to frame. So they move their face and the face warps and changes in a way that's unnatural.
Yeah.
And that's like, and it's just the human version of that. It's like, because it's not like a human has to understand if I'm moving like this mic or whatever, some sort of tube, they have to understand like how the weight would shift and according to the perspective that you're looking for.
Yeah. Because you get the liveliness. So much of it comes from that moving in a believable way.
Yeah.
And if it's like, it's very easy to not get that. And it takes a lot of, so I was concerned because it was such a pain. Like, I love hand drawn animation, but it was like, I was like, this is an incredibly difficult art form. It takes a lot of practice. And so Isabel was coloring stuff in, and I was like, oh, I don't want her to just be coloring stuff. I mean, that's cool, but like, she likes to draw, and Megan's very good at drawing, but what can we do to get them like Neo, like, let's go, and there's this DVD set of Richard Williams masterclass in animation, and it's amazing. It's super.
Who's Richard Williams for the uninitiated?
He's who they he did Thief and the Cobbler, which I've heard was like the ancestor of Aladdin.
Yeah.
I've like heard of that.
Mm-hmm. He famously didn't finish Thief and the Cobbler because it was the most some of the most technical animation ever conceived of by man.
He's someone I really look up to, but he's also like a cautionary tale to me, because there's a really good documentary called Persistence of Vision about him, and basically his obsession with the mechanics of animation, which made, in my mind, his masterpiece, the master class that he made.
Yeah.
Because he had hired people, he had hired like legends from Disney Animation to work for his studio, and he was around all these like, the 9 old men, and he just like idolized them and they would teach him. And he had this conviction that people weren't carrying the knowledge on. So he kind of took that on, and that's where this class came out of. And he's so passionate, like, and he packs all of his animation in with so much emotion.
He just loves animation. And what the masterclass, or the video series that he created, all is directly related or directly comes out of his book, which is the Animator Survival Kit.
Yeah.
I feel like I see the Animator Survival Kit on every animator knows an Animator Survival Kit.
Yeah.
If you want to learn animation, you have to get the Animator Survival Kit book.
I remember like when as a company we were like, because when we started we were doing a lot of MoGraph stuff, like a lot of just like, and this is like this line that no one really knows how to cut or delineate between what animation is and what MoGraph is. And we've had this conversation maybe even on the podcast before, but I feel like there was this thing where like animation started and it was pre-computer and it was based on like trying to make drawings move. And that built this huge history, especially through Disney and the 9 Old Men, of like this trajectory of heading towards this end goal. And then motion graphics, a lot of people from motion graphics, they had a completely different toolkit. They had a completely different thing and set. But then they started to sort of converge. These two like separate histories started to converge. And now they're so hard to disentangle. But like I came from a MoGraph perspective. Like it was all After Effects. I would tinker with Blender. Not very well, much better now. But like After Effects was my thing. But for some reason, I just wanted to get people. Like I wanted to see characters move.
Yeah.
And so the animation principles would start to sneak into the MoGraph. And then I cared less about some of the MoGraph stuff than I cared about the performance of the characters. And I was learning joysticks and sliders. And I was toying with a program called Rubber Hose, or a plugin called Rubber Hose in After Effects. But then we realized it's like, oh, we just like making characters. And then the first book we bought was the Animator Survival Kit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, again, this is like, I had a conviction years ago about this, and then Seth got brought onto the team, and then he's like made me rethink everything. And the way that I've started to rethink about it is kind of really lines up with like where the animation industry is, in a sense, because like my conviction about 2D hand drawn as opposed to like motion graphics was like, and how Richard Williams talked about animation was characterization. It's very human. The way that they talked about they perceived animation as a human, like actors performing. Even the animators would get typecast, like because it's acting. It's drawing, right. And so it's very much like a story and human performance, and like just so human centered. And so I was always like, oh, we got to do hand-drawn animation because that's where the characterization's at. And then Seth came and like does rigging and gets the liveliness that I thought was
impossible to get.
Yeah, I was like, you have to do hand-drawn because that's where it's really going to get this characterization. But then you like basically are like proved me wrong in that regard. And I'm like, whoa. And I think maybe the way that I would best describe it is I'd seen this video of my idol is Glenn Keane. I look up to Glenn Keane. I love Glenn Keane. I love his view of animation, his Christian worldview, how he applies that to animation, and Richard Williams and how he talks about it in Glenn Keane is this, their focus was like, what's most important? We're storytellers. The performance is the most important. That's it. That's what people want.
Yeah.
They want a good performance, and everything else can cater to that, can help that. If you lose that, you lose the main thing. You might have a nice, visual effects show, but people want story. They want humans dealing with stuff and all of the feels, and so that's what I get from them now is like, oh, it's not so much like the actual process as the focus and the worldview of what they're trying to do. And that's why Glenn Keane is so great, because if you just listen in an interview with this guy, it's like this dude knows what's important.
Yeah. So you threw this seminar, you gave this master class, or Richard Williams gave this master class. You guys are all eating popcorn to avoid the popcorning.
Right.
And you launched back in. How did that help? Did it work?
Oh yeah, it really helped because there is a like really specific process, like a sequence in which you do cell animation that makes it not overwhelming. And so again, it's not implicit in the programs. It's not implicit in how Procreate Dreams is structured. You just have frames that you draw on. That's what it provides you.
Yeah.
But the things Richard Williams would talk about are you want me to get detailed
Yeah,
with
dude,
it?
do
Okay,
it.
so let's just use an example of like a simple movement. If I wanted to animate me doing this, what camera should I look at?
Whatever camera you want.
Cheers, mate. Right? So a simple action like that is not, you can't puppet it and move it here and here and then tweak those movements. You'd have to redraw. And if this took, let's just say it takes, how long does this take? Let's just say 1 second up, 1 second down, 24 frames a second. That's what 48 frames. Well, if you're doing it on twos, and twos means, see, we're getting very technical now. On twos is an animation term, and that means that your drawing will last for the exposure of 2 frames. 24 frames a second, that means 12 drawings per second. So if this is a 2-second process, you have 24 drawings. So that gives you a sense of, it's a time consuming thing. So you have to draw 24 tied down, cleaned up, colored drawings to get that movement. And so he basically breaks down the structure in which you can achieve that, where the volumes are moving in a smooth way so that it's not popcorning. So if you do those drawings, then you can put on what's called onion skinning. And onion skinning is just, you're working on a drawing frame. If you have onion skinning turned on, you can see a ghost image of the other drawings that can help guide the position of where you put the next drawing. So if you have this drawing, keyframe, 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 next would be a breakdown frame. And a breakdown frame is essentially, it's not directly in the middle of the 2 frames in terms of number between them, but in terms of spatial movement. So I don't want to get too technical because there's a bunch of things, but as the hand comes up, does this look better? Or does this look better?
Right.
But in order to not get overwhelmed by those very tightly spaced drawings, you have 10 drawings maybe where the hand's moving barely.
Yeah.
You want that bigger structural thing to work within.
Well, this leads to another question, which is just regarding cell altogether, is smears, right? So when on camera, we're getting super technical. This is like one of those things technical, though, where this project really did. It made us think about all those things because we weren't running a play, right? Because we were like, hey, we want this to resemble old style animation. We want this to resemble Disney stuff. So you're literally going back to one of the masters to teach a seminar, which I think we did for like at least 3 or 4, maybe a week we did something like that.
That was really, I remember just being like, I was really hoping you guys would let us do that. I knew it was like a big ask to just take all day to do that, but I did feel very much like if they let us do it, it will say, that was kind of how I pitched. I was like, this is going to save a lot of time. Yeah. And what was I just want to say, like, Isabel and Megan just absorbed it like sponges.
They're awesome.
Like, I was like, it was just kind of incredible. Like they just learned it very quickly.
But the going back to the smears, it's like you have these volumes that are preset, but then when characters, like when I'm moving on camera and I go like this,
right,
it blurs because the camera can only expose at a particular fraction of time.
Right.
And so it blurs the distance, but cartoons don't do that. So cartoons, to make up for that feeling, they won't just paint like these staccato perfect things. For rubber hose animation, they'll often get a smear where they'll extend the shape and smear the shape and stretch the shape. And we're playing with that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love smears. There's like collections of smears from like famous films that you've seen, like, and you wouldn't know what they look like in isolation unless you like looked at these still images and it's like, Mickey Mouse all these old classics, like they all had smears, and they look really funny in isolation, but
together it's magic.
yeah.
So then to wrap this all up, so you guys had these Procreate Dream files they were struggling to get in, eventually did get them into After Effects. You had all the keys and everything tied down, all the things colored and cleaned up, putting it through the last stage. You were putting it in After Effects in the scene with the waves, the atmosphere, the rain. What did you handle in After Effects on this?
So I was pretty much animating the boat was my main character, I guess, and then I was dropping their hand drawn animation into the boat, and then all the waves. So I had a whole 3D scene laid out with all the waves in the boat and everything, and pre-comped somewhere in the middle where I could adjust all the character stuff, and then the rain on top of that as well, which was really simple. I think it was just an effect from After Effects rainfall or CC rain or something like that, which was fine for this. That worked great. But then to get things to feel cohesive, there was some color shifting, color adjusting, and trying to match the look. And also there's a lightning that was going on. So I did some animation for the lightning, which
Just think about, I love that the lightning hit, and you did the lightning on his like side, right?
Yeah, a lot of that was either some layer styles just in After Effects converted so that all you could see was the highlight, or I made it mono, just made it black and white for a frame or two.
And you also did all the little zest of the action of all of the objects on the boat, right?
Yeah, the boat jostling around, all those objects. I got them to shift and wiggle and slide, and so that was a lot of fun. And seeing this shot here too.
I know this is what I wanted to bring up, because in the scene where the captain throws all of the stuff off the boat, that is more complicated than you think.
Than it looks, yeah. And I don't know if it was worth it. Maybe it was, but ultimately,
how did you do it, Seth?
Yeah. So this was another feature that had just come out in After Effects. I could have done it in Blender, I guess, but where you could import 3D objects into After Effects. And so we got a bunch of stock objects, OBJs or FBXs, just from 3D models that I brought into After Effects, animated them over the camera and shifted them and spun them so it felt cool.
Yeah.
And then I think rendered that out to just a video layer, and then brought that into Dreams and drew over.
Yeah, you did this. This was your shot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Drew over every frame. And some of it was, I don't know if I remember doing the bike. I feel like Isabel may have done the bike.
Well, this shot I want to talk about, this shot at the end where he tosses the thing up. The boat has a 3D reality to it. It's not. How'd you do that?
I think it's just two planes. So the boat, or three if you include the captain there, and then the motor. And I think there's just a little bit of parallax between them, and probably some bending down of the boat. So even if it's flat, I could fake it and start to bend it in 3D backwards. So there's a front wall, a back wall of the it's not the cockpit. What do you call that? The cabin.
Yeah.
And then the back edge of the boat and the front edge of the boat. So they're all just layered in there. And then the captain's in the middle somewhere. And that was interesting to do.
There's so much, like I had never even noticed the amount of like sort of 3D space that was involved in the shot.
Yeah. So
because it just looks like it just rolls over you like a simple shot, but it's
Yeah.
got so much to it.
I remember you suggested breaking it up that way, and I remember being like, okay, yeah, I mean, that's easy for me to just split that up that way. And then to see what you did with it was like,
it was cool to be able to,
I was like, man,
to get all those walls together and just have one null controller in the middle that I could just rotate and spin around. It was just controlling the whole boat. You could add some wiggle and rotation to that. It felt pretty cool. So
I dig it.
It did feel like we were like sort of building a boat and then just putting our guy into it. So there was a lot of, I guess, 3D space involved in it. But
yeah, I think like one of the things like that, why I like this project is it does have that sort of, it does have that struggle, right? Because we didn't know exactly how we're going to do it. What I think about the end of it is like, as a learning experience, this was like a really fun project to learn. I think we've like, and it's funny because it seemed more than a year ago as far as like really the skills we've picked up, how we would do this differently. What are the core things when you're attacking? Like if we were going to say, okay, let's do Sarkis Tarsian, Nautical Sun Part 2. Like how would you attack it differently going in this time?
I think one thing we would try to parse out what scenes can we do in rig, and not where it doesn't feel weird, in rig, and then what needs like some higher level acting or something. I did want to mention though, as far as like rig versus hand drawn, is we wanted this project to have a magic to it from the hand drawn. I think it is partly just a nostalgic magic that people would like to see.
I don't think, because that was one thing is like, I don't think you can replicate, because I would spend a ton of time doing rigged animation. Like the early days of Coronation, I was doing tons of rigged characters. I would build rigs and have joystick sliders and set up. I wasn't the best in the world at it, but I got like pretty decent at getting these things done. I could never get the facial animation to have the same appeal as something like this. Yeah. Like the appeal of the face. And I think there are some animators who can do this. There are animators who work in After Effects who are wizards. Like I don't understand how they even, I just saw this one on Twitter the other day did I share this with you guys? This like these waves.
Yeah.
It's like unreal that these people know how to do this. This is like,
a lot of steps for that wave. I was like, man, that's deep. That is some deep nodes.
There are some people who have that capacity to get really expressive, but I don't think I've ever seen an animator pull off something in After Effects for a human emotional face that has ever pierced my heartstrings. I don't think it's now Moho. That's another story. There's more flexible rigs like Blender. Obviously, those are rigs like they can do that. Yeah, but like in After Effects, I've never seen it.
So. And I'm sure you could to some degree, but especially for us, it was like, well, we don't have the capability or the time to figure out rigs like that. And even if you did that, there's still a lot of redraws or art switching or whatever. I agree. But I think we wanted the magic of the hand drawn, and we put that in there.
I think like, and you guys might have a podcast about this at some point. Just the thing that you and Isabel spearheaded for this little fruity vampire. Yeah, I think I was thinking about that a lot when that whole thing started rolling, and I think that went a lot smoother. Like we did a rig scene when we did cell in when it would really shine, and then we did 3D when that made sense. I think because of that, it sped through pretty. I mean, there was like not much friction. That's my experience. Did you?
Yeah.
Not to go into another film, but it was just we brought a lot.
That's sort of like weirdly an emotional, or it's weirdly sort of like a next step from this one, the fruity vampire.
Yeah.
It's called Fruit Bat.
Fruit Bat.
Yeah, I think it. I think just being clear about what the pipeline is, and setting those standards so that everyone knows, and every scene has a place in the pipeline, and we know what needs to happen still before it goes to composite, and everything before that.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up, I want to talk about the one most important thing, which we didn't talk about, which was the first, maybe not the first, but one of the first anthropomorphic animal characters Coronation has ever done.
Oh.
Because I think in the history of animation, you will see Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, and you'll see Daffy Duck, and you'll see Bugs Bunny, and you get these wonderful anthropomorphic characters. And Coronation really never had any of those. But we got our first one.
Yeah.
The shark. How did
I was like,
where
what are
did
you
the
talking
where
about?
did the shark come from?
Oh gosh, I honestly think it might have been inspired by Coronation's salt shaker.
Yeah.
So we had a salt shaker of a shark, and that was the salt, and then the pepper was a leg that you stick in the shark's mouth, a human leg, and that was your pepper shaker.
It was, and it's like held together by a magnet.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember how wouldn't it be funny if a shark, like he's about to, it's like a secondary humorous thing. He's about to fall off this thing and the shark's getting like flossing his teeth, getting ready. Like someone's benefiting from this guy failing. I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, because I had initially said like we should see shark fins. Because in my mind, I'm like, talk about creative sprawl. In my mind, I was like, oh, we could just do it's just a fin. It's a fin in After Effects, and you puppet it, or you just move it 2 keyframes, a little bit of in between. Like it looks so cool and so easy. We're done. And then you come back with like a line test of like a shark flossing.
I was like looking at this. This would be funny to just show a shot of this. There's this kid show from like I remember watching as a kid. I'd be like, it's shark, like cell animated sharks in rollerblades. I cannot remember the name of the show, and I like looked up videos of it on YouTube. I'm like, yo, like these shows were crazy. Like this is wild. Like they're just skating around and they're sharks and like they're just super extreme. But like so that got me excited. and then I saw like the salt shaker. I was like I'd seen a photo of again because I romanticize early Disney and like a photo of Mark Davis or one of these guys, and maybe I think it was Mark Davis, and he was at his animation desk drawing Maleficent. And he had a clay model of Maleficent up, and then I like read about it a little bit, and they had sculptors that would like do clay models based off of the model sheet so that they could take it and look at it from different angles. Yeah. Again, the solidity of volume.
Yeah.
They have to maintain it in their mind, first of all, so that they can draw this thing from different angles. And so inspired by them, I went to the kitchen table and picked up this shark, salt shaker, and I was like studying how like the teeth, like how they started to disappear as like the form rotated, and it was actually really helpful. So it really does look basically like the salt shaker, and it's like a little homage to our little lunch assistant.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for going through this with me and for always being ready to crack new creative problems here at Coronation. And we'll see what kind of crazy death by 1,000 paper cuts we'll get into next year.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if you're interested in seeing more of Coronation's adventures as we try to figure out new creative challenges, tune into the next episode of Heralds and Fools.
Yo.